Hi, now we want to discuss about cellular principles in biomedical engineering. So we study building blocks of our human body, cells and tissues. You can ask, hey, I'm a biomedical engineer. Why do I need to learn about cells? So for example, I have a background in mechanical engineering. I'm designing the new prosthetic hip joints. So then you are dealing with a pretty big bones. Then what's the matter with this? However, if you think about the inside the bone is a collagen made out of collagen, but inside the bone, there are cells which keeps creating a new bones. And there are also cells which are actually carving out, eating up the bones. So you need to know, understand at the cellular level, even molecular level, to understand what's going on and to design a better prosthetic device. So in this a simple example, we need to get down to the cellular and molecular aspects of the living system. So the cell is a basic functional unit. It's a building block of our human body. So let's consider about this university you are in. So you, a student, or me, instructor, are individuals. So we are the smallest basic unit of this body. And what about you guys, students, or me, faculties? So accumulation of a similar type of single individuals forms faculty, students, or staffs. So the role of students are to learn and performing research, and faculty teaching, and staffs supporting the system. And when these faculty, students, staffs are put together, so we can form a department such as biomedical science and engineering, or school of life science, let's say. And these performed a specific function. And these schools and departments put together, forming a university, an entity, a system. So likewise, in our body, cells are the smallest basic unit of the body. For example, in the muscle, like myocyte, which means muscle cell. And when accumulation of these myocytes to form a specific functional unit, in this case, muscle cells form a muscle tissue, which will exert a contraction. Okay, that's the tissue. And these multiple types of tissue can be put together to form a physiological function. So for example, this muscle tissue forming an organ, which is a heart. So heart has a specific physiological function, basically pumping oxygenated blood and also gathering deoxygenated blood and sending it to the lungs for oxygenation. And so that organs put together, these various organs can form a living body, which we call as a system. Now, let's discuss about a primary tissue types. So here's an example here. So let's consider our arm and their surface. There's a surface, are multiple layers of cells, which is called epithelial tissue. The role is lining the surfaces in the body. And the second, for contraction or for movement, we need a muscle tissue, which is made up of muscle fibers, which can contract. And to move this, we need to send a signal, which is electrical. So there are specialized cells with projections that transmit this electrical turning on signals, which we call nervous tissue. And there are the rest of them are putting together these we call collectively as connective tissue. So for example, and this inside the body, under the skin, there's a loose connective tissue acting as a padding under skin and elsewhere. What about the bone? So bone is composed of a lot of bones and cartilage. These can be considered as a connective tissue made up of cells in a hard and stiff, a lot of extracellular matrix. And even you can think of blood as a connective tissue made up of cells in a liquid matrix. So all these connective tissues are related, composed of material or tissue between cells. There's more specialized structures are embedded, and this is called a matrix. So collection of cells of a similar type as a tissue, we talk about 4 kinds of tissue. So just look at this again. So movement, we need a muscle tissue here like this. And for communication, initiating and transmitting coordinated cell-cell signals, which allows these final movement is done by this nervous tissue. And the surface of our body or surface of organs, cavities, and these required protection or absorbing and secreting in and outside of the tissue, and that's organized into a sheets that cover the body surfaces in and out. That specialized tissue is called epithelial tissue. I'm going to get back to this again. And support and framework with rich extracellular material or matrix for mechanical strength and anchoring against adjacent tissues are called connective tissues. So let's bring an example so that we can understand about the organ, which is collection of 2 or more primary tissues which are organized to perform a physiological function. For example, let's think about stomach. So the stomach's physiological functions chemically disintegrate the foods for further digestion with enzymes and hydrochloric acid. So here's the stomach, and what are the functions of tissues which is composing a stomach, which is an organ? So stomach has also a muscle tissue. You can see here a lot of smooth muscle tissue that will mix stomach content. And for this, you need a nervous input. So nervous tissue will coordinate this muscular action. In fact, stomach has to code when it functions, it should have a coordinated action, like even heart together. And there's a lining of the stomach surface. That's here columnar epithelium. You see, it looks like columns, and that's an inner lining. And with the enzymes, which is supposed to disintegrate food, we have to make sure these enzymes should not eat up the stomach surface itself. So this epithelium should make sure the enzyme doesn't eat themselves, ourselves. So there's they secrete many things to line, to coat the inner side of the stomach. And all this need to bind these different types of tissue into a unit. That's done by this loose connective tissue. Let's take a look at a cross-section of the stomach. And this pinkish, blue and pinkish stain is famous one called hemotoxylin and eosin staining, or simply H&E staining. You can see darker ones are usually means dark bluish ones are nucleus, and pinkish ones represent proteins, so that pathologists can see and distinguish. So because the real tissue, maybe it's thin, you cannot see this contrast. So let's look at this. You see multiple pits over here. So this is how we can increase the surface area, and that lining cells here are called epithelium. You can see the nucleus are quite lined well over here on the lower side, and even these cross sections. And the middle one, you can see a muscle, smooth muscle tissues as well. So let's discuss more of the epithelium. Epithelium is such an important function that we should not, I want to explain a little more. So in medical aspects, why epithelium is important? What does epithelial tissue or epithelium means? Epi means above, that's the surface. And thelia is in Greek word teeth or a mammal's nipple. So probably we found this one from these. So epithelial tissue lines the external surfaces of organs and cavities of internal organs, including our gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus. So let's take a look. Where are the epithelium and how they look different? So nasal passage of, let's say here, you can see these lining and sitting this thin layer, which is called a basal lamina. And here it has a lot of cilia. Cilia is a fine structure which increases the surface area. And it's columnar. And then esophagus, which is linked to the stomach, is the lining is you can see multiple layers of epithelial cells. And the lungs, you can see a lung is also covered with epithelial cells because it's facing the air and the lung tissue. So you can see a simple squamous, a very thin layer expediting the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And the other part, you can see these intestines. So intestines are also covered with a simple columnar epithelium. And let's go to the kidney. Kidney, it's a filter system in our body, and then it secretes, so making a urine. So it has a simple cuboidal shapes of epithelium. And the urinary system, such as a bladder, need to expand and then contract. And that has a multiple layers and of epithelium. So one thing, while their shape and type looks different, there's something in common here. That is, you can see this blue. In fact, this is a pseudo color though, lining underneath this epithelium. That means all epithelium should sit on a surface, which is called it's a connective tissue called basement membrane. Sometimes we call it as a basal lamina, usually used in electron microscopy, but light microscopy, we call it as a basement membrane. So this is very important that distinguish the cells, epithelial cells always sitting on top of the basement membrane, makes the cell need to know what's the up and bottom side. This we call as a polarity. So polarity, the bottom side we call as a basal, and upside or luminal side is called apical. And the bottom side is a basal surface. You can see the basal lamina and basal surface. And each of these epithelial tissue are kind of lining, protecting, and distinguishing in and out of the body or organ. So itself are kind of connecting each other, and that specialized contact is composed of many things. An important one is called, they have to be very tight. So it's called tight junctions. And desmosome is a specialized molecule which connects membranes of each connected epithelial cells. And it's linked to the intermediate filament, which we will discuss next lecture. Another aspect you can see here is, can you see blood vessel here? No. So this is very important that this epithelial tissue do not contain blood vessel. So we call it avascular. So why epithelial tissue or epithelium is important in medical aspect? Because you know, cancer, over 85% of cancer death, cancers are arising from this epithelium. probably because they have a contact with outside of the world, a lot of inserts, or like DNA mutations can happen over here. And another, so that's why epitheliums are such an important, and there's a special term for cancer arising from epithelium. It's called carcinoma. And because of this, epithelium has a very good potential for regeneration if there's any damage or injury there. So let's get into a little deeper into the types of epithelium. You can see there's a number of names. However, it's very easy once you know about it. So first, you can see simple squamous epithelium, such as in a lung lining, or many blood vessels or lymphatic vessel inner linings. Here, simple means simply a single layer. While you can see another one here, stratified squamous epithelium. What you notice is there is a multiple layer, such as esophagus. So that's a multiple which protects against abrasion. Our skin is also another example. So in that multiple layer case, we call it as a stratified. And we also call squamous. Squamous means, you remember the fish is covered with a fish scale. So covered with the scale, we describe it as a squamous, meaning flat. Okay, so that's here. And another example of, let's say, a glands, sweat glands, inner lining of sweat glands or kidney tuber has this cuboidal epithelium. Cuboidal means just as like it's shaped as a square. So it's a cubic in shape, we call cuboidal. Another here example, stratified cuboidal epithelium, like sweat glands. And the other thing, we remember that in the GI tract, when we are absorbing food molecules, you can see simple columnar epithelium. So columnar means the shape is in column shape or rectangular in shape. So in this elongated shape, it's a simple columnar epithelium. And in this case, you see the fine structure on top, which we call brush border from the histology point of view. This is called ciliated, and there's a lot of fine hair-like structures which extremely increase the surface area. So this is related to the function of absorbing, such as in our digestive tract, or secretes mucus and enzymes. And another, there's also stratified columnar epithelium. And there's an interesting one. You can see this lining of the arrangement of nucleus quite regular, but there are sometimes these nucleus can be up and down. So it actually is a simple, but it looks like stratified. So we call it as a pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. And there's also a mixture of transitional epithelium. And for example, urinary organ to expand and stretch, like bladder, has this multiple layers of epithelium and different in shape. Now you could remember, similar to epithelium, there's a term specific for lining of blood vessels or lymphatic vessels. It's called endothelium. Endo means inner side. So endothelium is a special kind of epithelium which lines the columnar surface of circulatory system. This slide is just for a common sense. You will touch on many different levels of matrix. So I want you to basically know, like 10 to the first deca, second hecto, 10 to the third kilo, mega, giga, tera. These days, I think 10 to the 15, you need to know this peta. Or the other side of the, 10 to the minus 1 deci, such as deciliter, or 10 to the minus 2, such as in centimeter, and 10 to the minus 3, milli, minus 6, micro, and minus 9, nano, and minus 12, pico, let's say picometer, or 10 to the minus 15. It's a femto, such as femtosecond. Or now, I think you have to know also 10 to the minus 18. It's called etto. So just a good exercise. We're talking about cells in engineering point of view. One question is how many cells exist in our human body. We will continue on this.